programs. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, Commodity Supplemental Program, CSFP, and Food Distribution Programs on Indian Reservations, FDPIR. I would also like to offer a warm welcome to our newest Agriculture Committee member, Representative Chantel Brown from Ohio's 11th District. We are excited to have you join us today for your first committee hearing. Today, we will explore the implementation of these important programs, the adjustments made during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the long-term need of these programs and the organizations that operate them. TFAP, CSFP, and FDPIR support millions of Americans in need each year. These programs purchase American-grown commodities for distribution to food banks, tribal organizations, and other eligible community-based organizations supporting individuals experiencing food insecurity, serving both to combat hunger and support America's farmers. Throughout the pandemic, as many of us saw firsthand in our communities, these programs have shown great resiliency. They have responded to unprecedented challenges and adjusted quickly to continue delivering food safely to those in need. USDA Economic Research Service found that in 2020, 6.7% of U.S. households reported using a food pantry, an increase from 4.4% in 2019. Further, TFAP applied 2.2 billion pounds of USDA food to emergency food providers, many of which are faith-based organizations, up from the 1.7 billion pounds that were supplied in fiscal year 2019. In October 2020, the Connecticut Food Bank reported seeing a 44% increase in demand for food and services, while at the same time facing complications from national supply chain issues and a reduction of corporate food donations by more than half. Despite the incredible challenges in fiscal year 2020, they were able to distribute 47 million pounds and serve 147,000 people each month. It is clear that while the pandemic has created continuous challenges for our food banks and emergency food organizations, such as supply chain struggles and soaring demand, they have overcome these obstacles and shown great resiliency in the face of crisis. Similarly, CSFP, FDPIR, and organizations that operate them transitioned quickly to continue serving seniors and families living on reservations during the pandemic. Respectively, they serve more than 690,000 and 75,000 Americans on average each month in fiscal year 2020. From home delivery to mobile pantries to drive-through services, feeding organizations have made critical adjustments to protect the safety of their volunteers, employees, and those they serve, while still fulfilling their commitment to provide food to those in need during challenging times. Especially during the holiday season, when so many are relying on food distribution programs to feed their families at times of celebration. We thank each of you for your incredible services to your communities. I look forward to hearing more about your experiences over the past couple years and your recommendations for our committee as we move forward. I now like to welcome the distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon, for any opening remarks he would like to give.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Appreciate your comments. And I also want to welcome Representative Chantel Brown. Welcome to the Congress, welcome to the subcommittee. I want to thank each of our witnesses for your participation today as well. I want to first reiterate how important it is for this committee, but frankly, all the committees of Congress to bring forward the administration for conversations such as these. Whether it's the Agriculture Committee or any of the other committees, this administration has largely been AWOL from these committees. We're failing in our obligation as policymakers and as stewards of taxpayer dollars when we neglect our oversight committees. And right now, as far as I can tell, the only committee doing that is the Armed Services Committee. I think we can do better. But on the topic at hand, the department's nutrition distribution programs, namely TFAP, CSFP, and FDPIR, have long been complementary to SNAP and have aided families in need across the country. But we may be at a crossroads. The pandemic has shown us that there are so many different ways to do things, that massive spending does not necessarily lead to desired outcomes. So I look forward to hearing what has worked and what has not worked, and where we can potentially step in and make changes and make sense to both operators and recipients. I think CSFP is a great example. I'll recall Mr. Kubick's 2017 testimony regarding CSFP, and from that, necessary improvements were made to the program in the 2018 Farm Bill. So this testimony does work. Simply put, I am not sure autopilot is the right way to continue. With that, I look forward to continuing today's conversation. And again, I want to thank the witnesses for taking your valuable time to share your expertise. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back. Madam Chair, you may be on mute.
Thank you. I now recognize Chairman Scott for any opening statements he would like to make. I don't think Chairman Scott is here from the full committee, so I recognize Ranking Member, Ranking Member Thompson for any opening comments he would like to make.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hayes. I appreciate that, and just want to add my welcome to the gentlelady from Ohio that is joining us. Glad to have you on board. And thank you to our witnesses for your participation today. We last discussed these nutrition distribution programs, TFAP, CFFP, and FDPIR in 2017. Now, that hearing focused on the interaction between them and how they, in concert with SNAP, Americans in need found nutrition relief. Since 2017, a farm bill was signed into law, and a pandemic ravaged our nation and disrupted the way these programs were implemented. Today is an opportunity to hear about both, but also what the future looks like for each program. And the way I envision the future is through questions. Can we potentially reimagine how we distribute aid to families in need? If the pandemic taught us anything, it is that there is no one way to do anything, nutrition distribution programs included. Is there an opportunity to further work with organizations who are more deeply immersed in the communities? Does it make sense to expand these services to help families find independence simultaneously? How do we ensure these programs don't contribute to the growing instances of nutrition-related chronic disease? Is there an opportunity for a stronger relationship between distribution and nutrition education? Again, I appreciate the witnesses taking the time to share their expertise and foresight, and look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there is ample time for questions. I am pleased to welcome such a distinguished panel of witnesses to our hearing today. Our witnesses bring to our hearing a wide range of experience and expertise, and I thank you for joining us. Our first witness today is Mr. Carlos Rodriguez, the President and CEO of Community Food Bank of New Jersey. The Community Food Bank of New Jersey has seen record growth in its food distribution and program development under his leadership. Mr. Rodriguez has more than 25 years of executive leadership experience focused on improving policies and delivering services to those in need. Our next witness today is Ms. Mary Green Trottier, who is the president of the National Association of Food Distribution Programs on Indian Reservations. Ms. Trottier brings a great wealth of knowledge to our hearing today, having served as Spirit Lake Tribe's Director of Food Distribution Programs for 36 years and Director of their Commodity Supplemental Food Program for 4 years. Our third witness today is Mr. Frank Kubick, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program Director at Focus, Hope in Detroit, Michigan. Mr. Kubick is a current board member of the National Commodity Supplemental Food Program Association and a 4-time president of the association. He has been with Focus Hope since 1981 and has served in his current role for 10 years. Each month, Focus Hope provides food assistance to over 41,000 senior citizens in Michigan. Our fourth and final witness is Mr. Dave Donaldson, who is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of CityServe International in Bakersfield, California. In his role, Mr. Donaldson works to train and resource local churches and nonprofits to serve families in need. He has been with the organization since 2016. I welcome all of our witnesses today for this hearing so that we can conduct our oversight responsibilities on the NODO subcommittee. We will now proceed to hearing your testimony. You will each have 5 minutes. The timer should be visible to you on your screen and will count down to 0, at which point your time has expired. Mr. Rodriguez, if you are ready, please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hayes and Ranking Member Bacon, as well as distinguished committee members, for the invitation to testify today. I'm grateful to share my perspective on the levels of food insecurity in my community and how critically important nutrition distribution programs are to assist. The Community Food Bank of New Jersey is a member of Feeding America, the largest hunger relief network in the country, a network of more than 200 food banks and over 60,000 local partner agencies. This network helped provide 6.6 billion meals to tens of millions of people in need last year. Like our sister food banks across the country, the Community Food Bank of New Jersey works to fight hunger by engaging, educating, and empowering our community. We provide food for immediate need, connect families with critical financial resources, and address root causes of hunger. We work across sectors to create food security for all, and work with a wide variety of private and federal food sources to secure donated and purchased essential groceries. Through this large, decentralized grassroots networks of more than 800 community-based feeding programs, in 2021, we distributed food to support more than 85 million meals in 15 of the 21 New Jersey counties, where 800 residents struggle with food insecurity, including 200 children. In the circumstances we face today, there is more uncertainty in front of us than stability. I want to be clear that despite the significant actions that have been taken, our concerns about the charitable food supply keeping pace with need are serious. Anytime there's a natural disaster or economic crisis, low-income families and individuals are the last to recover. Although the overall statistics of our national economy have rebounded with low unemployment, the families we serve are still on a longer road to recovery, particularly as the direct pandemic relief measures phase out. During an early pandemic distribution, I met a mom of 2 and a caretaker for her own elderly mom. Marissa was on a miles-long line for emergency food assistance. Having been furloughed from her job at a daycare a few months before, her savings were enough to pay for 2 months' rent and expenses before she found herself running critically low on funds. She was unsure what the future would hold for her family when she turned to the food bank for help. She told us, right now, we're just living day by day. The struggles of our neighbors and food bank challenges continue to be complicated, not just by current supply chain disruptions and temporary increases in food prices. These challenges are both felt across the food bank network. Feeding America reports that cost to transport donated food has increased 20% since last year. Our own transport costs jumped 34% in a single year due to COVID. COVID has dramatically altered the mix of food that we source. A drop in donations necessitated dramatic increase in food purchases, 58% nationally, and our own food purchases more than tripled in a single year. For these reasons, our national network of food banks has requested, and I encourage this committee to support, an additional $900 million for TFAP in fiscal year 22 spending legislation. With investment from federal government, the United States has the potential not just to emerge from this crisis stronger and better positioned to meet the evolving needs of our communities, but towards ending hunger in America. We applaud the actions taken by Congress and USDA, and a special thank you to Secretary Vilsack for his heartfelt note last night, which have been critical to support communities and families since the start of the pandemic. bipartisan federal intervention, and an unprecedented response from the charitable food system helped prevent food insecurity from increasing even higher in 2020. We will overcome supply chain challenges, but to achieve the reality of people in America not facing hunger, we have to commit with increased fervor. There were tens of millions of people in America facing hunger before the pandemic, and that is still true today. Yet, as stated, an unprecedented response can achieve significant change. The most significant source of USDA foods is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP. It smooths out volatility that the pandemic-related supply chain challenges have caused. It provides a stable source of food for the network. Today, TFAP offers more than 120 foods. It is the backbone of charitable food system with an impact that is felt across every state in the country. The food banks and Feeding America Network are uniquely capable of working to reduce food insecurity through 40 years of growing our capacity, building public and private partnerships, responding to numerous crises, and driving innovation. We've certainly seen a lot. I hope my testimony and the questions I'm open to answering has demonstrated the critical value of USDA food programs, PFAB chief among them, to the work food banks do to address and prevent hunger among our neighbors. TFAB's stabilizing effect on the food supply as a reliable source of nutritious food for families in need has never been more important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I now recognize Ms. Trottier. If you're ready, please begin your testimony.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman Hayes, Ranking Member Bacon, and members of Congress. My name is Mary Green Trottier, and I'm a member of the Spirit Lake Tribe in North Dakota. I serve as president of the National Association of Food Distribution Programs on Indian Reservations. I also serve as the director for my program serving food distribution, commodity supplemental food, and also senior farmers market. These programs are a critical part of our food security safety net in our tribal community as well as other tribal communities across the country. I would like to thank the committee for asking me to testify today. A little bit about food distribution. We provide food assistance and nutrition education to nearly 100,000 people across Indian country each month. We also employ local and tribal community members and over 100 Indian tribal organizations who administer the program locally for citizens of 276 different tribes. Over half of our FDPR participants are working men and women, many of them who have children at home, in addition to nearly half of the FDPIR household members who have a household member over the age of 60. FDPIR is a critical part of our food security safety net for rural and remote reservation communities where many of our people lack the access to a grocery store or convenience stores that might serve as a SNAP vendor. It is also critical for a stopgap for tribal citizens in places with no food, with no limited access to stores or transportation. In our operations, we have over 100 ITOs.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Ms. Kubick, can you suspend just for a second? I remind all members to please mute your line so that we can hear the testimony of the witnesses. Thank you. Ms. Kubick, I'm sorry about that. Please continue.
One distribution practice is known as tailgating and essentially consists of delivery out of the back of a truck to clients who are homebound or otherwise may be unable to pick up food for the month. Poor internet access makes the practice of tailgating very difficult. Tribal communities have some of the lowest access to broadband in the entire country, and where that access does exist, it comes with an average speed of 66% slower than any other areas. This is especially problematic for FDPIR when we're transferring to a new inventory system that doesn't accommodate mobile usage. So that cripples our tailgating sites and finding it difficult and if not impossible to use the new software developed on tailgating sites. Mobile markets would be another addition that would be beneficial for FDPIR sites. Other inventory management software programs exist that could both meet federal data and privacy standards and work better for ITO. So there are other models out there that we're looking to use. In the spirit of self-determination and to solve some of these problems, tribes have recently requested that USDA look more broadly at allowable software systems that better suit our daily operations. While USDA has agreed they have the legal authority to authorize this, it has not yet utilized that authority to and unable to present a timely timetable for FDPIR. We will continue to work with our tribal leadership to discuss this issue in a government-to-government consultation with USDA officials. Some of the impacts that we've had for food distribution, the COVID pandemic has a disastrous impact on supply chain issues and the U.S. overall food system. And FDPIR has significantly felt those impacts. When the pandemic began in March 2020, our program saw an immediate rise in participation, with half of ITOs reporting that they certified over 600 new households in 1 week during the first week in March. The rise in participation put a strain on inventory initially. Fresh produce deliveries were significantly delayed and are even feeling the impacts of the supply chain crisis right now, especially with fresh produce, which is one of our important products that we offer for our participants. One of the ways that we can address these issues would be through opening up more local sourcing opportunities for these products in a way that looks similar to what USDA accomplished in the early rounds of the Farmers to Family Food Boxes. ITOs would be willing to work directly with local vendors to source local fruits and vegetables. It would eliminate a host of fresh produce delivery problems. The food would be traveling shorter distances and therefore far less likely to be arrived spoiled or rotten. By prioritizing local purchasing, it would also provide that market opportunity for native producers. Investing in agriculture through nutrition programs is a huge benefit for everyone. Tribal citizens will have more access to good food, and native producers will have a chance to grow their businesses, create jobs, and support the local tribal economy. Farm Bill for 638. The 2018 Farm Bill made several adjustments for FDPIR so that ITO program managers and tribal leaders have been seeking for a long time. One of the most exciting changes is the 638 demonstration project. This project acknowledges tribal sovereignty and food system by authorizing tribes to procure foods directly for the food package instead of going through USDA and having the federal government choose what food products are best for us. The 638 contracts started working a couple of months ago, and they are already ensuring that tribally grown nutritious foods are making their way to the tables of Native Americans. Although 638 contracts were awarded at the end of September 21, and tribes were prepared immediately to purchase and provide these Native American produce foods by their own people, the system issue delayed them. So at least 2 out of the 638 tribes have had the decision to either wait up to 8 additional weeks to start delivering fresh produce to their participants, or undertake the process of manually recording inventory until the product codes can be pushed through the system. So there's some glitches with our inventory management system that we need to address and upgrade and keep our inventories accurate.
Thank you, Ms. Trottier. We're over the 5 minutes, so
okay.
I can stop there. And I apologize for calling you by the wrong name earlier. I skipped ahead in my script. Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Kubick for 5 minutes of testimony. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Hayes and Ranking Member Bacon, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this invitation to speak about the Commodity Supplemental Food Program today. I'm grateful for this opportunity. CSFP has a long history of supporting our at-risk senior population by providing regular access to food items to supplement a healthy diet for them. The monthly food boxes provide a variety of items that can be incorporated into meals throughout a given month, reducing out-of-pocket cost and allowing senior income to be used for other food, medicine, or personal and household needs, helping a senior to remain healthy and independent. I want to thank this subcommittee for improvements to the certification process in the last Farm Bill and for their long, consistent support for our program. Extending the certification period from 1 year to 3 years results in easing the paperwork burden on program operators, and more importantly, it allows senior participants whose financial situation is not likely to change significantly, allows them to stay enrolled in this important program while they need it the most. We are hopeful that the next Farm Bill will address the issue of allowing seniors at risk to receive the program services that they need but are currently ineligible for. Removing the Medicare deduction from a senior's income determination is one idea that we are looking at. These past 2 years have been challenging, not only for participants, but for the staff and volunteers who run CSFP. Normal practice had to be quickly set aside in the face of the pandemic to protect those most susceptible. Stay-at-home orders, social distancing, and personal protection for essential workers combined to help keep us safe, but forced our agencies to revamp many of their distribution practices for the safety of all involved. Thank you to the Food Nutrition Service at USDA for their additional administrative action to help participants in program workers and volunteers to stay safe while distributing and receiving the needed food package. The practice of participants entering a building to stand and wait in line for food was replaced by drive-through distribution of boxes at many sites. Agencies set up social distancing areas and use personal protection equipment and drive-through pickup to allow participants to stay safe in their cars. Some put up tents in their parking lots to help staff and volunteers out through the elements. Others added or expanded delivery programs. Michigan winters are challenging, but the dedicated staff and volunteers stepped up to ensure that program participants continued to receive the nutritious food that they needed. Local agencies continued and expanded the use of proxies for food pickup, allowing seniors to stay home. They used automated calling services to announce closures and reschedule distributions. They used phone apps and signage to keep the lines moving. Some agencies use a third party, such as Amazon, to help deliver boxes to seniors who were homebound. And while these efforts kept distributions going, there were areas beyond their control that limited program operations. Stay-at-home orders kept participants away from distribution sites. New COVID variants, personal safety concerns, and lack of personal transportation that continued to limit participation. Despite all of this, agencies combined to serve their senior participants, and not one senior on our program at Focus Hope went without their food box, no matter what their situation was in regards to COVID. Thank you to the dedicated staff and volunteers who make this possible. CSFP became available in all 50 states in 2019. National program caseload has remained the same since 2019, with caseload adjustments made between regions and states to support distribution trends. We are working to maintain distribution levels and expect higher participation rates as the pandemic subsides and participant levels rise from previous participants returning and new participants joining the program. In addition, beyond the effects of the pandemic, the population of potentially eligible CSFP participants is expected to grow as baby boomers age into the required age bracket. States and partner agencies had the benefit of maintaining CSFP caseload and funding last year and would benefit from the same opportunity moving forward as the program and participation stabilize. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the USDA Midwest Region Food Nutrition Service and the Michigan Department of Education Office of Health and Nutrition Services for all of their support in the state of Michigan and the entire Midwest region. They are great partners in the fight to end hunger in this country. Working for others is an honor and a privilege. Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the subcommittee, for allowing us to do our part for your support of the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. We are deeply appreciative of you, and I know that the seniors who are on the program that you have impacted share my appreciation for all that you have done and continue to do on their behalf. Thank you for your continued support of CSFP and the seniors across the country who need their basic services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kubick. Really appreciate your testimony. I'll now move to Mr. Donaldson. If you are ready, please begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Hayes, Ranking Member Bacon, Chairman Scott, and Ranking Member Thompson of the full Ag Committee. and to members of the subcommittee. CityServe International offers the following comments on USDA's nutrition distribution programs and the role that faith-based organizations can provide in the execution of these programs. I'm grateful for your service on the committee for a couple of reasons. First, I married a farmer's daughter from North Dakota and managed our ranch there for several years while she taught school. And so she ran from bell to bell as well, Chairwoman Hayes. But I know the value of family farms and what they offer to our nation. Secondly, I know what it's like to go to bed hungry. In 1969, my parents were hit head on by a drunk driver, killing my dad, debilitating my mother for many years. And it was a village comprised of government, food banks, churches that provided food, clothing, and hope that we can make it through the crisis. Subsequently, my mother got on her feet and became a lead buyer for Dow Chemical. And let me just add, it was a combination of the aid, but also the life coaching of a trusted friend. CityServe International, it's a 501c3 tax-exempt, faith-based organization that provides logistical and structural guidance to churches that feel ill-equipped to fully reach the needs of their communities. CityServe is aware of TFAP, CSFP, FDPIR, and while we acknowledge the goals of these programs, gaps exist among them in both rural and urban communities. Moreover, access to them to further drive down community and regional hunger has not been available yet to our organization. Our experience with government funding programs is linked to USDA's Agriculture Marketing Services Farmers to Families Food Box Program. By all acknowledgement, the Food Box Program was a new and innovative program geared to respond to anyone in the U.S. facing food insecurity due to COVID-19. The Food Box Program, however, was catalytic in discovering other needs of families as CityServe and our partners was able to tangibly meet, such as beds, diapers, school supplies, home furnishings that we provided through our many warehouse hubs and points of distribution. But during each distribution, CityServe cultivated trusted relationships with under-resourced families, and we were able to successfully link many of them to public and private programs geared towards helping them move from dependency to stability. Under the program, CityServe and its 2,000 plus affiliated organizations that included National Baptist Convention, World Vision, Hispanic networks, together we came together to make sure that the neediest among us received food. The program has effectively responded to the persistent economic disruptive effects in urban, rural communities, also with our tribal nations. And it was also transformative, reaching those acutely affected by the recent joblessness and long-term unemployment. And many had even given up on seeking employment opportunities and traditional government social support systems. On a personal note, I participated in many of the distributions as part of the means testing and spoke with people about their need for the food boxes. Nearly every person I spoke to said they were running out of food and felt alone in their struggle. And I cannot adequately describe the importance of the social interaction that this program brought to people that were cut off from the support systems of their friends and churches. And so this degree of interaction was important. It may not be available in some of the traditional USDA food distribution outlets. Many valuable lessons were learned from the Food Box program. With these, CityServe and others across the country are right now attempting to replicate the program with private funding. CityServe is currently conducting a Food Box program distributions in several states. We actually have instructions, recipes on how to really live, a good balanced life. Despite this, the resources of the federal government in redeploying the Food Box program and its inclusion of faith and community-based organizations could significantly bridge gaps in current USDA programs, and curb food insecurity among all ages, genders, ethnicities in both rural and urban communities. CityServe highly encourages Congress to restore the food box program as a tool within USDA's nutrition distribution programs. CityServe thanks the subcommittee for inviting us to provide testimony and is committed to the conversation and action towards improving the efficiency, reach, and value of federal nutrition assistance and distribution programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. At this time, members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members. You will be recognized for 5 minutes each in order to allow us time to get to as many questions as possible. I will stop questions after 5 minutes. Please keep your microphones muted until you are recognized in order to minimize background noise. I will recognize, I'm not sure if Ranking Member Thompson is still here.
I am, Madam Chair.
If you'd like to be recognized first, I'll recognize you out of order to ask your questions. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you so much. Thanks for this this great hearing. Thanks to all the witnesses for your insightful, both your written testimony and your oral testimony. Mr. Donaldson, your written testimony references CSFP, TFAP, and FDPIR, and acknowledges that gaps exist within and among these programs in both rural and urban communities. What are those gaps, and what has CityServe done to fill them?
Well, thank you for asking that, Congressman. CityServe has worked hard on building a collaboration of faith-based, community-based organizations, and as I mentioned, over 2,300 different distribution sites, many of which are in rural areas. We call it the last mile of need. And in rural areas, it's been unprecedented to see the many sectors come together, government, churches, social services, emergency services that have come together to fill that gaps and to make sure that nobody's following through. And as I mentioned, that I really feel like the key component to this network and engaging the churches is the relationship side. If you wed the social services, which are wonderful, such as SNAP and others, and you combine that with the relational programs, for example, of churches, that is a key, I believe, to helping people move from really dependency to sustainability. Obviously, there are people that are suffering with mental, physical disabilities that we just need to continue to support. And also we need to respond to victims of disasters. But overall, I believe that, like my mom, people want to be lifted out of dependency into sustainability, and it's worked.
Well, very good. Well, thank you, sir. I mean, you're really describing the amazing moving parts of America's nutritional support I know this committee is proud to be a part of that. In many cases, and I'm going to open this up to whoever would like to respond. In many cases, food preparation is just as important as the types of food selected or distributed. And I'm interested to hear from the panel about your current nutrition education efforts that you believe have proven to be effective. And can you share your views on practical, easy to understand nutrition education recommendations and their effects in our communities? Any of the witnesses who care to respond to that?
This is Mary Green Trottier. I'd like to respond that food distribution, we do offer nutrition education. Our funding is very limited. We have competitive grants that are available to FDPIR participants that is less than $1 million. There is additional money in the 22 budget. So we are hoping that we can access some of those dollars. The models that we have within our program are very sustainable and they're working. Our clients see us every month to pick up food, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a month to receive those benefits. So they have that ability to provide that much needed nutrition education in Indian country.
Of all the programs that you offer, is there one in particular that just really rises to the top, you're very proud of, you'd like to see it replicated, just be a great example of a best practice?
I would have to give a shout out to my program. We offer CSFP, Senior Farmers Market, and the nutrition education component along with the food distribution program services. And we are also co-located with our local SNAP agency. So that model has been a really good use in our country to work together, and we're able to provide education for both agencies by having them co-located.
Very good. I know my time is waning here, so I don't really have time to hear from the other witnesses, but I would ask if you do have, best practices that you've identified, just great examples of effective nutrition education, if you could forward that and share that with the committee. I think we would all benefit from your experiences and your successes. So, Madam Chair, thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you. Excuse me, Ranking Member Thompson. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Rodriguez, you mentioned the need for continued storage and distribution funds for food banks. I've heard about the same issue back in Connecticut. I led a bipartisan letter with Representatives Schreier, Davis, and Young asking for $100 million for storage and distribution under TFAP in fiscal year 2022. Is the greater need for storage and distribution funding a reflection of a lack of sufficient storage space at food banks, more fresh and perishable food being available to your clientele, or something else? And how would more funding for these purposes help you better support your clients?
Thank you, Chairwoman. It's a combination of all three. It's the combination of wanting to provide more nutritious food, which tends to be more perishable, needing the capacity for food banks in some cases to store more of it, but more importantly, that last mile of distribution, which is the 60,000 local partners that Feeding America networks engage with, the faith-based organizations and the very diverse partners that we engage with. It's making sure that they have local or sufficient storage capacity to hold food, even if it's just temporarily, to get it out to folks in a food-safe manner. So we, in our efforts to continue to grow the nutritional density of the product that we distribute, and to couple it with nutrition education and the financial resources so families can shop on their own, this capacity that you reference is critical. We focus on food first, but not food only. And I think that comprehensive approach, which has a profound impact on our neighbors.
Thank you. I was pleased to see that food banks consider the items received through USDA foods to be highly nutritious and balanced, and include everything from fruits and vegetables to eggs, meat, poultry, fish, nuts, milk, and more. The Yukon Rudd Center for Food Policy and Health has recently done research showing that when food banks provide simple, nutritious information on the food they offer to pantries, food bank clients tend to choose healthier food options. In your experience, are the healthy foods provided in USDA foods in high demand? And do you think providing uniform nutrition information across food pantries would help clients? I would appreciate any help you can give us in dispelling harmful stereotypes about how low-income families are not willing to or care about nutritious foods.
In just a few years before the pandemic to this current year, our distribution of fresh produce has increased from about 15 million pounds to over 35 million pounds. If there was no demand by our neighbors that we're looking to serve, there'd be no distribution. What helps in accomplishing that is exactly what you mentioned and what our congressman asked earlier. Simple awareness is the best education. Many folks don't know what a rutabaga is, but once we create samples in our test kitchen and provide it to local pantries and they taste it, with common ingredients. Everyone knows what a rutabaga is, and we can move them by the truckload. So there's a lot of diversity in the food insecure Americans around the country. And introducing them to new product, especially produce, teaching them what the nutritional value is, and getting the children involved is something that has been a winning recipe for creating awareness and helping us to distribute more of that product throughout the country. And we have great programs. The SNAP Ed program supports nutrition education throughout the country. Here in New Jersey, we partner to the state and really bring the two programs together to be able to leverage not just the foods that we introduce, but proven interventions that can create nutritional awareness and healthy habits as well. And it starts with something simple, awareness.
Thank you. Mr. Kubick, in your testimony, you mentioned that seniors with income just above eligibility levels often still need food assistance from CSFP. Can you elaborate on what you have seen on the ground that speaks to that needs? And how would reevaluating what is considered income for the purposes of eligibility for the program help that situation?
We've seen a lot of seniors who would come in here and have real needs for food, but we're slightly over the income guidelines based on the Medicare portion of their Social Security. That is considered income, even though the money never hits the senior's account and the senior never has access to that cash. So they're missing the program because they're just a little over based on that. We don't have any deductions to income. We have a straight flat income requirement. We're not asking for a lot. We don't want to add a burden in terms of paperwork, administration to the program. But the Medicare portion, which is not money that the senior sees, seems to be something that we could look at and not consider it income. That's all we're saying. We're not looking at any other deductions or anything else. We just would like to see that Medicare portion not considered income, because we are missing seniors who have real needs, and seniors, our experiences, don't come for help unless they need help. And I think that's important to know.
Thank you. I'm sorry my time has expired. I yield back. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Nebraska, Ranking Member Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your line of questioning, too. I think nutrition and fresh foods is a very important topic here. I work in a lot of different areas with our military and trying to get people in the military and recruitment. And what we find is over 70% of our 18-year-olds to 21, 22-year-olds don't qualify to get in the military, largely because of physical fitness and nutrition. And so this is a serious problem, and not just here with folks with food security, but it's a national problem, I think, that merits our discussion. My first question is to the whole panel. In many cases, food preparation is just as important as the types of food selected or distributed. And I'm interested to hear from the panel about current nutrition education efforts that you believe have proven to be effective. Can you share your views on practical, easy to understand nutrition education recommendations and their effect in our communities? And I'll start with Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bacon. Nutrition education and the simple awareness of what food is being provided and available has been very successful for us. Simple things like including recipes in distribution boxes or bags, doing tastings, as I referenced earlier, have gone a long way to introduce new product, mostly fresh product and produce at that, to a diverse community, especially here in New Jersey, but throughout the country. So it's very simple. We have proven interventions. USDA has a wonderful list of SNAP Ed curriculum that have been proven to have the impact of awareness and creating healthy habits. When we bring the two together and coordinate both programs, we found meaningful change. So much so that we're in a 3-year initiative where we've done exactly that. Married nutritious food to nutrition education and some more health awareness. And we've seen an impact on diabetes and pre-diabetic populations in a pilot that we've been running. That pilot held strong even throughout the pandemic. And we're now in looking to see how this model, as other food banks have done throughout the country, can be expanded and can be replicated in every community by every partner.
Thank you.
The most wonderful thing about this model is that we did not do this ourselves. We did this in partnership with our local network, faith-based pantries, local after-school programs, schools in some cases, to be able to bring product no matter who the partner could be, but more importantly, where the neighbor is that needs it.
I'd like to Thank you for your comments there. I'd like to ask Mr. Trottier or Mr. Kubick or Mr. Donaldson if they have anything else to add.
Yes, I would like to add that some of our nutrition best practices are handing out the recipes, nutrition education incentives. We also host classes with the high school students and the fifth and sixth grade students. They come to our facility and they do hands-on food preparation and learning how to actually prepare food. One of the issues that I would also like to address is that state tribes do not have the access to the state SNAP Ed dollars. So we need to find a way that tribes can have that direct access to those state SNAP Ed funds, where our communities are based that have some of the highest poverty levels.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it. Mr. Kubick or Mr. Donaldson, you have an opportunity if you'd like.
Thank you for your question. As I mentioned, we are distributing food boxes that are privately funded, and inside we have recipe cards that describe the box's contents, what fresh fruit, vegetables, dairy are in the box, along with recipes, cooking preparation methods for healthy eating. And as I mentioned earlier, we really believe that you combine that program with life coaches, people that care, and that can hold you accountable in a very positive way. And that has really rendered the most success thus far.
I'd like to add something also.
Thank you.
Nutrition education is part of the CSP requirement each month, so that each food box does get a recipe, a newsletter. We do in our sites have food demonstration kitchens, so we can take some of the newer products that USDA provides and make recipes with them to help the seniors utilize them the best way they can and maximize them. Many of the seniors will turn in recipes themselves. The National CSP Association has a cookbook that is made up of recipes that were submitted by seniors to the different programs across the country. So nutrition ed is real important, and I think the seniors love it as well. It gives them a chance to work with the foods and get the most out of them and make new things that they may not have thought of before.
Thank you, sir. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bacon, for your comments. I just would like to add that in reference to the USDA Farm to Families food box, although the program has been ended under the Biden administration, it was replaced with targeted funding to support food banks and the emergency food systems, including $400 million for purchases of fresh fruits and vegetables, $100 million to expand the reach of emergency food systems into underserved areas, including rural, remote, and tribal and low-income communities, and $400 million for states and tribes to directly purchase local foods for distribution and as an effort to combat or address some of the fraud that was reported in that program. So although the program has been suspended, the investments remain, just in more targeted programs. I now recognize the gentlelady from North Carolina, Representative Adams, for 5 minutes for questioning. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ranking Member Bacon for hosting today's hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for their testimony. Food distribution programs have played a critical role in addressing food insecurity during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. According to Feeding America, at least 60 million people turned to charitable food assistance programs in 2020. That's an increase of 50% from the previous year. In my district in Mecklenburg County, the Emergency Food Assistance Program and the Commodity Supplemental Program collectively provided over 22.6 million pounds of food in our community. And as the U.S. continues to grapple with the pandemic and associated supply chain disruptions, we must continue to provide the waivers and the flexibilities that have assisted federal distribution programs fight hunger. Though in previous hearings, my colleagues from across the aisle would have framed current supply chain disruptions and volatile food prices as being caused by the current administration. Now, these problems were brought on by the pandemic during the last administration, problems that we continue to face today. Now, Now, Chairwoman, before I continue, I would like unanimous consent to insert two articles into the record. A May 11, 2020 New York Times article describing empty shelves at grocery stores in New York and across the country with waiting lists and black markets and for items such as flour and pasta. And a June 9th, 2020 article from Wall Street Journal highlighting the fastest rise in food prices in more than 40 years.
Order.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Trotter, excuse me, you noted that supply chain issues caused by the pandemic began to be felt by the food distribution program in Indian reservations as early as March of 2020, with 66% of Indian tribal organizations reporting in March and April 2020 that they were out of some inventory items. I have having stocking levels recovered for most of the Indian tribal organizations. Are you seeing that any continued impacts that we should be aware of?
We've struggled with maintaining adequate fresh produce choices through the pandemic. Supply chain issues were a big part of not receiving the full catalog of items that we expected. We continue to have oftentimes poor quality of produce and a vendor accountability for supplying fresh produce.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, in addition to supply chain complications, which have impacted food banks since the beginning of the pandemic, you mentioned that a drop in donations has contributed substantially to the dramatic increase in food purchases that food banks have had to make. So how have the decreases in donations impacting the ability of your food bank to plan for and keep up with increased demand during the pandemic? And are there ways that Congress can better incentivize donations?
Thank you, Congresswoman. You're absolutely right. First of all, that supply chain issues started as early as March of 2020, as soon as the pandemic hit ground. And it started with donations not being as available as there was a run on product by those who can afford and did afford to be able to purchase. And it's evolved since then, and I just have to commend the team here at Community Food Bank of New Jersey that adapted to the many different supply chain challenges throughout the last 20 plus months. A stabilizing element in our ability to provide the record amount of food that we provided was the TFAP program, as I testified earlier. It is this product that we can consistently work on bringing in, work with our local state Department of Agriculture, who have been amazing partners throughout this effort, to be able to purchase food where we see gaps, make the buys that are available, and bring it in the quantities that make sense for our local partners to absorb. It's this juggling act and ability to leverage different food sources and supplies of food that make food banks an essential boots on the ground responder. And it's the way we've been able to adapt to the many challenges. And I'm sure we'll continue to adapt to the challenges that are in front of us.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm out of time, so I'm going to yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Adams. I now recognize the gentleman from Arkansas, Representative Crawford. If you are ready, please begin your 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the hearing today, and to the panelists, I appreciate your comments. First, let me applaud CityServe's important work in your community and the work to include high quality food in your distribution efforts. I represent a rural district, as many on this committee do, and many of my constituents don't have immediate access to fresh foods, especially produce in their communities. And that's one of the ironies of rural America, one of the most productive agricultural parts of the world, and we suffer from food deserts in many cases for a lot of folks. And Mr. Donaldson, you're correct that the Families to Farmers Food Box program did reveal opportunities to move excess fresh foods to people in need. How could CityServe's model be expanded in that role or utilized nationwide to help solve that last mile challenge that you addressed earlier?
Well, thank you for your question, Congressman. And yeah, we have put a lot of effort into the rural areas in Arkansas, where the need is severe. I just got to tell you, the food box program for us was highly successful. It was a huge welcome mat to faith-based, community-based organizations within our network that were previously not engaged in food, insecurity issues. And so as a result, I think it raised up an army of compassion across the country. We distributed over 17 million boxes, and we were also able to train, these volunteers. And then it ended, as you know, last May. And so we really believe, as I described in my testimony, it was very effective. Obviously, there were some bad actors, and there were some things that we can improve upon. But that's our hope, that this could be reinstituted and that we can build upon the success of it.
Thank you for the response. Madam Chair, thank you for holding this hearing, and I don't have anything further, so I will yield back.
Thank you, Representative Crawford, and thank you for your questions. That's a very important issue. One of the complaints that we heard about the program was that it didn't reach all communities. About 22% of U.S. counties did not have access to the program. So that's a very important question to ask. Thank you for asking that here. I now recognize Representative Carbajal for 5 minutes for questioning. I'm not sure if he's still on the platform. Okay, I'll go to our next Democratic member. I recognize the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Representative Custer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to unmute, make sure you can hear me. During this holiday season, we are especially reminded of the needs of our fellow Americans who struggle with food insecurity and hunger. And so this hearing is so important to highlight advocates and champions who work year-round to make sure that families have enough food to put on their table. In New Hampshire, we have our food bank, our community action programs, and pantries across the state that provide millions of pounds of food and millions of meals to our fellow Granite Staters every year. So I'm pleased we've been able to work in a bipartisan way to strengthen federal food purchasing and distribution programs that support these efforts, especially during the COVID pandemic. And I believe there's more that Congress can do to strengthen the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP, and other USDA programs. So with that in mind, let me turn to Mr. Kubick. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program is imperative in New Hampshire, as we have one of the oldest median populations in the country. With the numbers of these over 60 and eligible for CSFP growing dramatically, how is your organization, Focus Hope, working to address the growing need? And do you have recommendations for what we can do at the federal level to ensure that this program will continue to serve all who need it?
Well, thank you, first of all, your support for the program. We're glad to see that New Hampshire, which came on 10, 15 years ago, the program is thriving there. But we don't want programs to thrive just to grow programs. We want programs to serve a need and fit a need. And so we know with the aging population, with seniors, we have to address the nutritional needs of those seniors, particularly those who are homebound and isolated. And I think what's worked for us is partnering with other agencies, other groups in our service area, whether it's community agencies, whether it's apartment buildings, businesses, to make sure that seniors get the food delivered to them at their apartment building or where they're at. I think transportation and having the ability to reach the food is critical, especially for seniors, that you've got to get the food to them. And I think CSFP, with their volunteer network, with their community organizations, can reach a lot of seniors who are isolated. But the reality is the numbers are growing. And the challenge we have as operators is to reach those seniors. And I can say what's worked for us has been those relationships. And we have
Great. And
businesses.
the volunteer efforts. I know I've done some of that myself, delivering Meals on Wheels, and it does make such a difference. Often that's the only contact that seniors and shut-ins have. So I've got to move along here. My time is short. Mr. Rodriguez, I'd be curious to get your thoughts about administrative flexibilities that were put in place for TFAP during the pandemic, including adjusting income eligibility and waiving signature requirements. Do you believe these flexibilities have been helpful? And do you think that any of these flexibilities should be made permanent?
I do. I think we're taking stock of the many waivers that New Jersey applied for and USDA granted. It gave us the flexibility to adapt when we didn't even know what we were adapting to in those early days. And it's not just for the TFAP program, but for CSFP as well, and all the distribution programs that we engage with. It is important to maintain this level of flexibility because the need constantly changes, whether it's the root causes because of a pandemic, a natural disaster, or other reasons. We're constantly and we're continuously learning from our neighbors, from our local partners to see how we can better meet the evolving need of our communities. And so, yes, I do believe that we should take stock of some of the waivers and keep making the program as flexible with the right balance of maintaining integrity and supply chain opportunity.
Excellent. In my remaining seconds, in addition to the supply chain complications, you mentioned a drop in donations. How have the decreases in donations impacted your ability to plan for and keep up with increasing demand?
We had to replace drop in donations and address the increase in demand with purchases. As I mentioned, over 3 times more purchases than we were doing before the pandemic. We project we'll have to do that for at least another 2 years to meet the continuous need, absent any more variables introduced or economic shocks introduced into the system. We do see donations coming up, but it's going to take a longer time to ramp up those relationships, at least here in New Jersey, and we're hearing the same across the country.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all for the work that you do, and with that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Representative Custer. I now recognize the gentlelady from Louisiana, Representative Ludlow. You have 5 minutes to begin your questioning.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hayes. And to all the witnesses, thank you for your time and participation in this hearing today to discuss the U.S. Department of Agriculture's nutrition distribution programs. I represent the 5th District of Louisiana, and as many of you know, that region of the state is home to many rural communities that is stimulated by agriculture, small business, and local economies. When reviewing these nutrition programs, I believe it's essential to ensure they are adequately meeting the needs of families, especially in rural America, where many lack access to fresh foods like fruits and vegetables. Mr. Kubick, in your experience working with the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, what is the participation rate across rural areas?
You know, I'm not prepared to answer that question right now. I'd have to take a look at that because each program, I'm in an urban area, and even our association, our membership is varied. So I don't have an answer for that. I could definitely look into that for you and even speak to the program in Louisiana. I think Food for Families, Food for Seniors is a program there that administers it, and we can find out and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you for that. And in your written and oral testimony, you complimented the committee's work on the 2018 Farm Bill in extending certification periods for senior participants from at least 1 year to up to 3 years in some circumstances. Can you further expand upon the impact of these changes, and have you seen an increase in participation?
Well, our caseload definitely went up. National caseload went up in 2019 to 736,000. So the impact has been seniors who, the challenge for them sometimes is just identifying those documents that you have to certify once a year on. And so to come in every 3 years is big help. The seniors, their situation isn't going to change. You know, their eligibility, they go up the cost of living and Social Security, which doesn't put them over. We get a CSFP gets an adjustment to income once a year because of inflation. So there were a lot of seniors that would, you know, it'd be 11th, 12th month on the 1 year certification, you know, couldn't find the records at home. I mean, that happens. I can't find things at home I'm looking for sometimes. So it definitely, you know, it's a challenge. So just spreading it out to 3 years made a big difference. Again, the situation isn't going to change for that senior. So we, think 3 years makes sense. And we do updates every year just to make sure that they're still current and with us. But as far as that, the full certification and bringing your income and proof of that, we don't need that now. And it's been a big help.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. And Madam Chairwoman, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Representative Lutlow and Mr. Kubick. I can't find things on my desk sometimes, so it's completely appropriate that they can't find 3 years worth of documents. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Representative Panetta. You have 5 minutes when you're ready to begin your questioning.
Outstanding. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Ranking Member Bacon. Thank you for holding this hearing, which is on a topic that is obviously very important, not just to our nation, but also to my home on the Central Coast of California. And obviously, thank you to the witnesses who have taken time to prepare their testimony, but more importantly, all the work that you do to ensure food security for those who need it the most throughout our country. So thank you very much. Appreciate you being here today to discuss these important USDA nutrition programs and obviously how they support all Americans in need, particularly in light of what we have been and are continuing to go through with the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, over the last 2 years, the fragility of our nation's food supply has been highlighted. But so were many opportunities, I have to say, at the federal level, which bolstered nutrition assistance programs and actually plan for the future to protect Americans experiencing food insecurity. And I got to say, I'm actually proud of the work, the bipartisan work that we did here in the United States Congress. Look, starting back in December of 2018, in which we passed the Farm Bill in the 115th Congress. And then obviously moving forward into 2020 and 2021, dealing with the pandemic, the increase in federal funding for food assistance that obviously led the way in which we could have a more food secure future. And then even now with the Build Back Better Act, which invests nearly $35 billion in funding for proven child nutrition programs that will help us combat childhood hunger and ensure children overcome the educational, health, and economic impacts of the pandemic. But obviously, as you've talked about today, and I think we know pretty well here in this subcommittee, there is a lot more work to do. And so I appreciate our witnesses being here today to provide these updates. And I do look forward to working with all of you and working with my colleagues in Congress on both sides of the aisle to strengthen the USDA nutrition programs. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm going to hit on you first in regards to my questions. Recently, I sent a bipartisan letter with my friend Adrian Smith, both of us on the Ways and Means Committee, requesting that there be enhanced tax deductions for food preparation and donations to food banks. Now, I'm also sure, and based on my discussions with our food bank people back in the district, in my district on the Central Coast of California, you're probably aware of the Harvard Food Policy Clinic's letter that they sent about basically asking for tax deductions for donations on food that will be resold, if you see the difference. Now, I think we'll understand that, tax incentives for donations obviously help food banks, but I'm concerned that including food that will be resold in these incentives will create a revenue stream for those who will sell food rather than assist food banks and who will give it away. So, Mr. Rodriguez, obviously, in understanding your understanding, your knowledge of this area, talk to us if you can on how tax deductions for donations complement your work, but also how might tax deductions for resold food create larger challenges?
Thank you for the question. And I think you're absolutely right. Tax incentives do help motivate and help inspire donations by many of our food industry partners, many of whom participate in donation programs already. I would be concerned if we expanded to food that's going to be sold at this moment. And the reason for that, as I testified earlier, we have seen a drop in donated product. We are re-engaging with our local food industry partner, many of whom are retail stores, whether they're big brand names or local family-owned chains, and to be able to have to compete with a for-profit incentive may cloud and may distract from being able to bring the food that we need for our most vulnerable neighbors. If our neighbors can go buy and purchase food, I guarantee you they would. The reason they turn to us is because they have no other choice. And we don't want to limit their choices by having funneling food away into endeavors that may be worth it. But I think at this point, I would pause on that and look at what the implications are, especially as we're just trying to build back a response and a base that's sorely needed at the moment.
Outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm short on time. And just let me also say, Mr. Donaldson, I too married a farmer's daughter from North Dakota, Rugby, North Dakota. So we have that in common. So I yield back.
Congressman, we have more than that. I actually live in the Bay Area and big fan of your dad. And Monterey's my favorite getaway place. So
it's my favorite place.
Getting acquainted.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Panetta. Happy to host an entire hearing to bring the two of you together. I now recognize the gentleman from Indiana, Representative Baird. You have 5 minutes for questioning. Please begin when you're ready.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the invitation, and I really appreciate you and the ranking member's efforts to bring this kind of discussion, and I appreciate the witnesses. I have no additional questions. A lot of the ones I had have been answered already very well, and so I yield back. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's hearing. Seeing no further members of the subcommittee, I now welcome the gentlelady from Ohio, Representative Brown, who has waved onto this committee to join us for questions. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready. Please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. Madam Chair, I'm proud to attend my first Agriculture Committee hearing, especially on the topic of the critical role of food distribution programs, which have played a huge role in fighting hunger during the pandemic. Congress made historic investments, including through the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan, aimed at strengthening and expanding the nutrition safety net. Boost to SNAP and USDA nutrition distribution programs provided a critical lifeline to vulnerable children and families from Ohio and across America. Specifically, the Emergency Food Assistance Program supported Ohio's food banks, including the Greater Cleveland Food Bank and the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank in my district, as they did heroic work to feed hungry Ohioans in the darkest days of the pandemic. From July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, the Ohio Association of Food Banks network of food banks and hunger relief agencies provided 290 million pounds of food, or around 242 million meals, to Ohio families. Of this, TFAP provided over 72 million pounds of food, or nearly 1 out of every 4 pounds of food distributed statewide. So there is no doubt that food distribution programs played a critical role in addressing hunger during the pandemic. According to the USDA, food insecurity remained nearly unchanged from 2019 to 2020. However, hundreds of thousands of Ohio households continue to experience food insecurity, and hunger actually increased among Black Americans nationwide. In the face of these continued challenges, I look forward to working with my colleagues on the committee to further strengthening nutrition programs to ensure no American goes hungry. So I have a couple of questions for Mr. Carlos Rodriguez, and in your written testimony, you say that SNAP is the most important of our federal anti-hunger programs and the nation's first line of defense against hunger. Can you please speak about the interactions between SNAP and TFAP and how SNAP supports the work you do at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey?
Thank you, Congresswoman Brown, and for that question, and welcome to the committee, I guess that I should say as well. A big shout out to our friends in Cleveland. I had a privilege of visiting them a few years back. Amazing food bank indeed. TFAP and SNAP work hand in hand. And in fact, when in many of the food distributions that we are part of, either directly or through our pantries, we want to ensure that anyone who finds and has a need for emergency food also has access and the ability and opportunity to apply for the SNAP program. And in fact, it is the first line of defense. You are correct in pointing out. It allows families to do what you and I probably take for granted, going to a local market and making the choices that are right for our families. That's what the SNAP program does. It gets us closer and closest to doing what we all want to do, which is be able to sustain ourselves with our employment and our jobs and what our community provides. When that's not enough, the SNAP program is that first line of defense. And when that's not enough, you have TFAP and emergency food, or as folks transition to that program or become aware or navigate the application process, we have those programs. So you're right in pointing out that they work hand in hand, glove in glove, and hopefully the more folks on SNAP, at one point, we hope that it will, with an adequate and strong program, and it has been strengthening, it will mean less need for emergency food over the long run.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, USDA this week announced $400 million of funding through the American Rescue Plan to support local food purchases, with an emphasis on purchasing from underserved farmers and ranchers, as well as another $50 million available for TFAP, REACH, and resiliency grants. What kind of things could this funding help you do?
Well, we're excited to look into the details of that funding, work with our local farmers here in the Garden State of New Jersey, and see how we can continue to build on something we've been doing since the farm to family boxes, which is bring in more produce, more Jersey fresh produce specifically into the hands of our neighbors that need it the most. So we're eager to see if we can put that to work. And I just have to commend the focus on disadvantaged farmers to kind of give them a leg up. It's overall strengthening our supply chain and our ability to produce our own food in more than the ways that we're used to and were disrupted by the pandemic. So it's a welcome addition, and we look forward to engaging with it as appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Madam Chair, I see my time is expiring, so I yield back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Brown, for joining us and for your line of questioning. It is always very important to me to highlight the dignity that goes to low-income families having the ability to shop and choose their own foods. And I think that the SNAP program and the benefits provided really help to do that. I see no other Republican members. I see that Mr. Carbajal has rejoined the hearing. Are there any Republicans on the platform who would like to ask questions? Okay, I recognize Mr. Carbajal, the gentleman from California, for questions. You have 5 minutes. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rodriguez, in September of this year, I hosted a day-long hunger tour in my district to visit programs addressing food insecurity throughout the Central Coast. That day, I also hosted a Hunger Holistically roundtable to discuss equity and access needs in the food systems and ways that local programs are helping fill the gaps. I appreciate all the efforts in my district that are addressing hunger holistically by providing quality, nutritious food, stimulating our local economy by collaborating with farmers, helping address climate change, and supporting the health of children and families and their families. With over $1.7 billion in COVID relief supplemental funding for the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP. In your experience, how did the extra funds help address food insecurity on a holistic level?
Well, first, thank you for your continued commitment and creating awareness in your local community. And I love the approach to be holistic. It's not a either or, but it's how much can we bring together to make a family whole and to really nourish our neighbors into a post-pandemic success. The TFAP program was absolutely critical at providing a stable source of food through 120 different products many of them fresh produce, and other like products that help us bring the nutrition that's needed into local communities. The wonderful thing about our network of food banks, it's not just a one commodity type or one food source type. We leverage what we know is available through TFAP, which at its core is critical, and we surround it by donations and purchases to make sure that at every community there's an opportunity to bring the food that's needed. We couple that with nutrition education. We invest in our local pantries here in New Jersey. Last year alone, $3.2 million for capacity for hand warmers for those winter distribution months and other things that are needed. And that's the investment, and that's, I think, the holistic approach that we can learn from through this pandemic and build on as we move forward to a much stronger recovery.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, to continue, with all the impacts that COVID-19 pandemic has had and will continue to have on tackling hunger, and as we move forward, what specific aspects of TFAP work and what elements of the program can improve from your perspective as the president of an organization of your size?
I think continuing the flexibility that we saw through waivers is something that we can build on. To be able to reach and give flexibility on signatures, on documentation, on alternative use for distributions is something we want to explore. I think, as mentioned already a number of times, this local purchasing opportunity will help strengthen this public-private partnership that TFAP is, strengthen the abilities of new farmers to engage in the program, and help more of the food that we see in high demand become available to the populations that need it most. So I think there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to seriously digest, pun intended here, as we move from this pandemic reality, continue through a recovery, but really deal with the aftermath of financial impact that this has had for so many Americans throughout the country.
Thank you. Continuing on, with your ask for an additional $900 million for the TFAP program in fiscal year 22, could you highlight how that money would be used to tackle the crisis at hand?
So there's a drop in TFAP overall distribution product that we see happening or happened. About 30% of what was cumulative TFAP product, whether it's the entitlement, the boxes, or even some trade mitigation product that all became available or intersected during the pandemic. Most of that will drop because some of them were in fact temporary. The $900 million will help us address some of that drop, especially as I've testified, when we see a lot of volatility and uncertainty in front of us. And donations still building up over the next 2 years, at least that's what we predict here in New Jersey. So it's a stabilizing force, a further stabilizing force that will help us address problems that we know are coming, but don't really know exactly how they'll manifest. And I think it's that stability that we need, and we owe for our neighbors that will continue to struggle and may struggle anew as the economic rebound continues to take shape.
Great. As the Farm Bill gets ready to be authorized in 2023, how can we improve the TFAP program? And I'm limited on time, so a short answer would be great.
More food, distribution capacity for us and our local pantries are the two things that I know happen most. We bring in new partners all the time. Those two things are core to expanding further into areas of high need.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Representative Carbajal, for your questions. Seeing no other members on the platform, this concludes our questions from members. Before we adjourn, I invite the ranking member to share any closing comments he may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the Chairwoman's mentioning the additional $2 billion in the food bank centric investments. The Office of the Inspector General continues to review TFAP. I look forward to seeing their findings. I'd request unanimous consent to submit the USDA's OIG's August 2021 interim report on TFAP.
Without objection.
With that, I just want to thank all our panelists today for sharing their expertise. Nutrition distribution is important. We live in the wealthiest country in the world, I'd say the greatest country in the world, and a great nation provides a safety net and also helps get people out of poverty. Some of the key takeaways today is that we need multiple methods in getting nutrition to the most needy. We need to stress nutrition more as well. I heard that as well today clearly. And faith-based groups also provide a great alternative to serving those in need. Finally, it should always be our goal to give a hand up out of poverty and not just a handout. And with that, Madam Chair, I thank you for your time. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bacon, and I echo your sentiment. In the wealthiest nation in the world, people should not be hungry, full stop. I want to thank each of our witnesses for your time today. I think I speak for the full subcommittee when I say how much we value and respect the important work your organizations are doing each day to combat food insecurity in the United States. We value your expertise and appreciate your willingness to share your time with this subcommittee. As we begin to craft the next Farm Bill, we will reflect on what we have learned today to make policy that meets the current needs of our constituents and again ensures that no person goes hungry. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any questions posed by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Nutrition Oversight and Department Operations is adjourned.